Hi, I'm Carrie Hoffman. I'm the co-director of the Region 8 Comprehensive Center, and I want to welcome everyone to this presentation today about some really fantastic and fascinating work happening in Ohio that Region 8 is helping to support with the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. So I'm going to introduce Lori Vandeborn. And Lori, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then when you turn it over to our other speakers, I'll let you introduce them.
Okay, that sounds great. I'm going to share my screen right now as well.
And I could give some background if you want while you're doing that. Or do you want to do it?
I'm going to be pretty much giving background as my
Okay,
the
perfect.
presentation, so that's fine. Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Vandeborn. I am a subject matter expert with Region 8 Comprehensive Center. Over the past 3 years, I've provided technical assistance to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, and I am humbled and honored to share our learning journey with you today. The Region 8 Comprehensive Center, or R8CC, has collaborated with leadership in the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce's Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies, or we refer to that as OLIS, for the past 3 years to embrace an authentic, experiential, multi-phase learning journey. The journey began when OLIS sought to build coherence between supports provided to the field by content area specialists. These supports centered around high quality instructional materials and practices and have shifted in the direction of curriculum-based professional learning. R8CC provided learning experiences for the internal Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies team to shift practices and create a coherent learning approach rooted in that curriculum-based professional learning. So during the first phase, the Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies in Region 8CC reviewed how high-quality instructional materials practices aligned with processes already in place in Ohio, including the Ohio Improvement Process, the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System, and some multi-tiered systems of support models. The second phase began, if you look at this chart, after reading the brief titled Instructional Coherence, a Key to High Quality Learning Acceleration for All Students. So in phase 2, R8CC and OLIS leadership decided to spend 2 team meetings, which are a 90-minute team meetings, reviewing the brief and discussing instructional coherence with the content area specialist on the OLIS team. This helped to shift their learning to increase their knowledge of how coherence naturally fits with high quality instructional materials. So at this point, phase 3 started as new leadership from Teresa, who you'll hear from shortly, stepped in and made another connection to the book titled Transforming Teaching Through Curriculum-Based Professional Learning by James Short and Stephanie Hirsh, who are here with us today as well. This book provided a natural progression from educational coherence to how to implement high-quality instructional materials through curriculum-based professional learning. So during phase 3, R8CC and OLIS began to align high-quality instructional materials and educational coherence to the curriculum-based professional learning elements highlighted in the book. We spent 8 team meetings at 90 minutes each, conducting a very unique book study approach, which has resulted in empowering the team to authentically understand curriculum-based professional learning and to be in a place where they can also share this guidance with educational leaders and content area specialists around the state. If you want to learn more about high quality instructional materials, you can find some more information in our national comprehensive center has a brief that highlights Ohio's work in that area. I'm going to drop that in the chat right now if I could find my chat, so that you can have a little bit more in-depth knowledge about that high-quality instructional materials work that Ohio did. It's highlighted in this brief that I'm dropping in the chat right now. So on this next slide, you'll see a list of all of the content that we analyzed and studied during this learning progression. As we were looking at high quality instructional material guidance and working to support that work, we looked at the Ohio improvement process, the Ohio teacher evaluation system, a whole child framework, plan to rise literacy achievement, and we did alignments between all of these, the guidance documents between the offices, which led us to instructional coherence and trying to look at how we can be coherent between the guidance that we're providing from multiple offices. And then aligning to that curriculum-based professional learning finally. So as you can see, that internal learning progression. I want to share a screenshot of the second, what kickstarted our second phase, which was the article, Instructional Coherence, Key to High Quality Learning Acceleration for All Students. And this was one of the document that really had us started thinking and shifted our focus from that high quality instructional material guidance into finding coherence between the systems. I'm going to also drop that link in the chat as well, so you can look at that article in more depth. And if you, and also there is, if you want to learn more about educational coherence, we also have a National Comprehensive Center modules that are addressing educational coherence, that it actually includes a video and dissecting of a video of a student that's going through a non-coherent day in comparison to a contrast of a coherent day. And I will drop that link in the chat as well. I'm dropping a lot of links in here. So, but that's kind of what drove our shifts in mindset and thinking. We're thinking about these different resources. And in phase 3, which we are concluding, we are pretty much coming to a conclusion of right now, the OLIS, we took a different approach to learning. So the Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies, their leadership divided their content area specialist team members into 7 different teams. Each team was then asked to co-create and facilitate a session based on their assigned chapters to the book. So as co-creators and facilitators, the OLIS team members were responsible for creating PowerPoint slides, activities that participants could engage in, and reflection questions for their colleagues to consider. We authentically applied these concepts within the book to our learning experience and modeling a curriculum-based professional learning approach, utilizing the book as our high-quality instructional materials. So I'm going to also drop in a link to the original white paper titled "The Elements: Transforming Teaching and Learning Through Curriculum-Based Professional Learning," if you want to dive deeper into that content area as well. That's the article, "The Elements," or the white paper, "The Elements," that came before the book that Stephanie and Jim will talk towards in a bit. So here are some considerations, because the best learning comes from reflection. And here are some considerations that the OLIS team and our HCC asked ourselves along the way. So as we were doing high quality instructional materials guidance, we were asking ourselves, how does HQIM relate to the OTES, OIP, whole child, and MTS systems? How could those in the OLIS office communicate that the use of HQIM can support these other processes and develop a more coherent system across offices? We were considering educational coherence. We thought, how could the OLIS staff encourage instructional coherence in the content area support that they currently provide? And how could OLIS staff ensure that the guidance they provide aligns with requirements and suggestions from other offices? And then finally, we shifted into that curriculum-based professional learning. And we thought, how can OLIS and RHCC replicate this professional learning experience that we're having within this internal team for districts and schools? And how can OLIS and RHCC apply the knowledge gained to professional learning experiences that we develop as we move forward? So the goal that we had the entire time was, and this comes directly from the book, was to provide professional learning that mirrors those experiences that students will have with the materials. So from the OLIS learning sessions, R8CC has taken what the team members have created, and we've compiled a set of facilitator resources for districts and schools to use for their professional development in the same manner. We've truly stayed true to the goal throughout the process and have developed facilitator guides that actually provide professional learning that mirrors the experiences that learners have with the materials, using the book as our high quality instructional material at the core. So the facilitator guides include step-by-step instructions for studying and reflecting on curriculum-based professional learning with district and school staff. It includes ideas for interactive activities and PowerPoint slides. These facilitator guides will be available once edits are completed per the Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies team feedback that we recently obtained. So we created the facilitator resources, and then we spent a 90-minute session allowing those who created the original resources to review the facilitator guides that we had compiled and provide feedback for us and make suggestions on resources or how they may have done it differently, which was very beneficial, and we got a great deal of feedback doing that. So while the facilitator guides do include the content for the book Transforming Teaching Through Curriculum-Based Professional Learning, the ideas can also be applied to any book study or curriculum deep dive that could be facilitated by professional learning specialists or educators. I'm now going to pass this over to my counterpart at the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. Teresa, would you please introduce yourself and explain the journey from your perspective? Talk about where we are and where we're headed next.
Absolutely. So I'm Teresa Castellaneta, Assistant Administrator in the Office of Learning and Instructional Strategies, leading a bunch of the work around HQIM and hopefully now CBPL as we move the state forward. I am going to apologize because it's hailing out right now. So whoever, Stephanie, I think you mentioned storms. If I go in and out, just know I'm out because it's hailing. So I'm like, not ideal. But thought I would take a few minutes to fill in. I know Lori kind of gave you big picture, as well as some details about our journey through the work, but I thought it would also be insightful for me to share our perspective. So you've received Region 8's perspective. So in preparing for this webinar, I went back and did some reflection on my own. And one of my favorite books of all time, Michael Fullan, The Change Leader, love that book, love the simplicity of it. Chapter 3, he talks about motivating the masses, and that's exactly what we were trying to do with this work. And I say that because we realized at one point, Lori and I both did as we worked together, that not only do we need to build external capacity in the field, in our districts and schools and our educational service centers, but we also need to build internal capacity. So in chapter 3, Michael Fullan says, to get anywhere, you have to do something. Give people the experience and build on it. And I think that's where Lori and I started realizing that we needed to also provide the same type of experiences that we were providing for the field. We needed to provide it for our internal team as well. So I know she's kind of already walked you through where we started. This actually started prior to me with the previous leader with guidance on HQIM that then quickly morphed into HQI because we realized we needed to broaden our scope a little bit to include more than just HQIM. But I worked with Lori, we did a vision, we did a mission, we came up with a purpose. I think at some point we even had a graphic, several different graphics, but the idea was to try to find alignment and connections in all of the parts and pieces that Ohio is working on right now. So I know she mentioned the Ohio improvement process, we talked MTSS, we looked at the whole child framework. We even dove into Ohio's plan to raise literacy achievement. That was in the fall and early winter of 2023. About that same time, in February and March of 2023, can you hear the thunder? Do you hear my house shaking? Sorry, hopefully we're good. But anyways, and I know we're recording and people will appreciate the live piece, right? Jim, you mentioned that, like life happens. So about that time in February and March, we attended, a few of us from the office attended the IMPD convenings in Chicago and Nashville. And I had a light bulb moment as a leader myself, where I was like, wait, we've got to press pause. And so I went back to Lori and said, we can't just focus on Ohio's work and Ohio's documents and Ohio's frameworks. We need to actually broaden our scope beyond Ohio, and we need to look at what is out there across the entire nation. So part of our attending the IMPD meetings, we read Instructional Coherence. We read that paper. And so light bulb moment for me, I was like, oh, this is high quality instruction. And then when we went to Nashville, we read chapter 5 in Transforming Teaching Through Curriculum-Based Professional Learning. Huge light bulb moment for me, because that's all about systems. And so lots of just little connections for me in the sense of, oh, this relates to the Ohio improvement process. This is TBT, this is BLT, this is DLT, this is all of the Ohio improvement process work. So about that time, I'm going to just reflect again. I pressed pause again, and I was like, wait a minute, we need to build the skill set within our internal team. Because we all know, as Michael Fullen says, acquisition of skills creates clarity. So let's get clear about our roles and where we're headed next. So Lori and I decided to share the instructional coherence article with the team. We worked through it. We discussed implications of coherence in schools and districts. We even discussed coherence at the regional and state level. We really tried to empower the team to think about awareness, like what their role is at the state level. Certainly, we can't go out and do the work of instructional coherence in schools, but that doesn't mean we can't message it at the state level. Once I read, like I said, chapter 5 in Transforming Teaching Through Curriculum-Based Professional Learning, I realized that not only is this a shift for teachers, but this is also a significant shift for our internal folks as well. And so when we think about in the book in chapter 5, which I love, teacher collaboration, sort of moving from those general advice sessions, right? You think of those teacher meetings where we're all sitting around and we have an hour, and it sort of becomes, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? That general advice sort of seeking and giving, to what would happen if we had HQIM and we were implementing it, and we were implementing it well. That shifts the focus of those general advice sessions to actually detailed discussions about the materials and instruction. And so, oh, this kind of fits into what I'm doing with Region 8. We also realized that we already have the language established in Ohio. Part of our central message is that HQI provides that common language and platform for educators to engage in the work in the first place. So that leads me to my next lesson, again, tying back to Michael Fullen. Doing things together creates shared ownership. So we decided to continue this work, and we decided to actually do the book study with the internal team. And so taking that idea from the book that teacher learning should be anchored in the materials, so that teachers should be experiencing what students are experiencing, we took that up a notch, and we decided that our consultants internally should be anchored in the book as well. And so they would be learning what ideally instructional leaders should be learning when they read the book. And that's what sort of spurred us to the idea that they would actually then be developing this facilitator guide. We launched the book study. The consultants absolutely loved it. I had one consultant read it in under 5 days, and it was our fine arts consultant. It was not someone who you would typically expect. We would expect an ELA person or a math person or those tested areas. She read it in 5 days and absolutely loved it. And so I realized right away, we need to latch on and do something with this. Specifically, they loved chapter 6. Region 8 helped us really do a deep dive into the concerns-based adoption model, because we realized this not only is going to need to be a shift in their thinking, but we're also going to have to address those concerns in the field, because it is a shift in thinking. They especially also enjoyed chapter 7. They liked the ideas in the book. Leaders are learners, and if we don't model that ourselves, we can't expect the field to do it. They're also firm believers in the idea that knowledge is constructed. Shared vision, huge, right? We all know that how important that is in the review, selection, and implementation process. So not only did we read the book, but then we coupled the reading experience, the professional learning experience, with some additional activities in our office. We went on implementation visits with another partner, instruction partners, And we actually watched what those classrooms or the spring walkthroughs looked like after teachers had received all of the implementation training. So they were actually able to see HQIM at work and what that looks like in different classrooms. So our consultants were out actually observing the work in schools. We also just last week did unit internalization training with instruction partners for all of our consultants so they could see what the teachers were experiencing as part of that journey. And then finally, and I think it was a phenomenal session. We had Jim and Stephanie on with us to actually kind of do some deeper dives into chapter 6, I believe, to kind of, and we actually saw, or Jim shared a video, which was awesome, which I believe we're going to even maybe take a look at today. So our current work is really trying to think about how do we support schools and districts moving forward with curriculum-based. Hear that lightning? Sorry. My poor dog right now is under my desk. She's so afraid. But anyways, we're going to move the work forward, right? So we really want to create a culture of curriculum-based professional learning in Ohio. We know that we have to stress the importance. We know that we have to raise awareness. We know that it's going to be tough because this is a huge mindset shift. And so I'll end with, again, Michael Fullen, persist no matter what, being flexible as you learn more, because that's what we've had to be with Lori, with all of the partners we've worked with across the entire state to really move this HQIM work forward, and hopefully now to lean into curriculum-based professional learning.
That was fantastic. And I'm so sorry about your storming situation.
It's so stormy.
Yes, so be safe. But I think we're turning it over to Jim and Stephanie now. So Jim, would you like to introduce yourself before you get started?
Sure. My name's Jim Short. I'm with Carnegie Corporation of New York, which is Andrew Carnegie's foundation, and was fortunate enough that when Stephanie retired from leading Learning Forward to collaborate with her on this project. And so we've been deeply engaged in thinking about curriculum-based professional learning for the last 4 or 5 years. Stephanie?
Well, I think you introduced us, so do you want to start with the slides?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
So y'all have already seen the book, and one of the things, I don't know if it was mentioned or not, but that Ohio has made available to every educator in the state of Ohio can have access to the book. Teresa, that's correct?
Yes, so educators can access it through Info Ohio, and yes, there are unlimited copies, and we've pushed it out, I think, once or twice already via Gov Delivery. So yes, super excited to have that book available and unlimited copies at that. So no holds, no waits.
You know, every time I hear you all tell the Ohio story, I'm more impressed by the level of commitment that you all have made. And I love the fact that, you know, at times you paused, you stepped back and you said, okay, now how are we going to even do this better? How are we going to try and put into practice what we're preaching? How are we going to apply everything that we're learning and give ourselves time to do it well? And just, again, congratulations on the amazing work that what you've accomplished. And I hope lots of people will opt in ultimately to see the webinar to be able to hear that story. Jim and I thought we'd take a few minutes to kind of share a little bit about what compelled us to write the first challenge paper for the field and how that led to the book. And probably most of these organizations on the screen are familiar to everyone. You know, all of this work that we did was preceded by our country having the opportunity to have new standards, being the Common Core movement, having new standards in states, and recognizing that merely passing standards, adopting standards doesn't mean that teaching transforms overnight. And so best practice research began to show us the powerful impact of instructional materials could have in classrooms so that teachers were better prepared to teach to the new standards. We saw the research then said about the amazing impact that those materials could have for student learning. But then we also learned that the resources aren't always implemented in the way that we expect them to be, and to be able to have the impact that we want them to have. And so that professional learning coupled with the resources was going to even produce better outcomes. And all of these organizations played a key role in advancing that movement, beginning, with the role Student Achievement Partners and Next Gen Science had in helping to advance the ELA, the math, and the science standards, and then also promoting what they look like in practice. And Ed Reports getting involved in helping to distinguish between those materials that meet the standards and those materials that don't. And so becoming kind of our consumer guide to quality instructional materials. CCSSO bringing together the network of the state leaders, recognizing that states really have amazing convening and policy and support roles to play in ensuring that teachers do have access to higher quality materials. And so learning, as you said, from each other, how other states take that position to be able to ensure that more teachers are using higher quality materials. And I just want to do a call out to your state facilitator in the network. Alyssa, thanks for joining us today. I know Ohio had some kind things to say about you in our last webinar within the state. Rivet took the lead on saying, let's distinguish who are some of the quality professional learning providers who really demonstrate that they understand and can implement effectively curriculum-based professional learning. Ripple and Learning Policy Institute are continue to document the research on effective professional learning as well as curriculum-based professional learning. And then Learning Forward with the new standards after I left made the nod to the importance of curriculum and made it a priority standard. And so I was excited to see that. And when Jim said, let's work on this challenge to the field of how do we make sure all of these things work together, I was thrilled because in my last few years at Learning Forward, I just got so excited about the potential impact of high quality instructional materials and recognizing that professional learning can be broad or it can be very directed and it can have great impact. And I couldn't find anything that I thought could have greater impact than what could happen when we would focus professional learning on the materials teachers use every day. So from these groups, what they were learning, as well as lots of practitioners who we interviewed, who came together in a convening, we were able to create the framework for the elements. Jim, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So as we looked at the research and we looked at what we knew about effective professional learning and then the needs of curriculum implementation, we started to think about this from two perspectives. One is, what are the design features of curriculum-based professional learning, and what are the enabling conditions for curriculum-based professional learning? And the design features we put into three categories: core design features, structural design features, which are like the settings that professional learning takes in how we organize things, and then functional design features in terms of how does it work. And we often in conversations around the elements focus on the functional design elements because sometimes they're overlooked. I think most people that look at this framework for the first time go to places where they resonates with their current work. And a lot of times we see that be the structural features. What does people think about? What are the different models? How are we finding time, and how are we organizing teachers into groups to work together? We also see a lot of folks gravitate toward the essentials, which are the enabling conditions, because obviously the resources have to be in place and leadership has to be in place that understands what this looks like. What we want to plant folks with the idea is to encourage you to think about curriculum-based professional learning by looking across all 4 categories. And really push yourself to, if you gravitate to 1 or 2 specific elements, to try to then push your thinking to be looking at how would you integrate at least 4 elements together that represent all 4 categories. And we think that'll deepen kind of the way folks think about that. So for instance, if we were to look at transformative learning, trying to change the beliefs and knowledge of teachers through experiential learning, how would we do that? And we would look at the learning designs that would promote that kind of learning for adults. We would look at the structures, whether it be an institute or professional learning time or some kind of other coaching or workshop session. And then we'd have to make sure teachers obviously have access to the resources, to the curriculum and instructional materials or assessments that professional learning is going to focus on. And so by looking across all 3 categories, as opposed to just connecting to the ones that maybe you're the most familiar with, we think is one of the ways that folks could use the elements to kind of deepen their understanding of curriculum-based professional learning.
It was really challenging to think about what are maybe the 2 or 3 most important ideas that we wanted to leave with you all today. And Jim just shared one, like look across the framework. You know, the second thing that I want to say, even before introducing this, is something that is just so representative of what you all are doing in Ohio. Once we finished writing the book, I said I could no longer ever design a professional learning that wasn't really representative of the elements and where we didn't practice what we preach. So when you think of anytime you want to work with adults and you want them to experience what you want them to be able to do, I think is the most challenging professional learning to design. And so I have been like really reluctant to step in to design certain things with people, because if we're not going to be able to model what we want them to do, then I say we can't do it. I can't do that any longer and be authentic in terms of what we have put in the book and put forward to the field. And it's a lot of work. So I can imagine that facilitator guide took hours and hours for people to figure out how are they going to really put into practice what they're going to be asked to do with this information. The other thing we wanted y'all to think about was in terms of the phases of curriculum implementation. This is also, as you know, in the book, we spend more time talking about early use and ongoing implementation. A lot of the early work that you all did in the state network work also was early, information about how do you support better adoption, how do you lay the foundation for even curriculum implementation. But early use for too many people is let's unpack the materials and see what we've got. And it ends there. And what we know is how we allow teachers to first experience the materials. If we expect them to use the materials in new ways, cannot be the traditional orientation, but it really is that immersive learning experience that allows them to sit in that student hat, learner hat mode before they begin to even think about what is their role in terms of teacher. And so we just wanted to call that out, and also to say early use does not happen one time. Early use can happen over multiple years. It can happen whenever a teacher begins a new unit, or it happens whenever a teacher changes a grade level and has to use new materials. So it's not a one and done, and how you plan, and that should begin to impact how you plan for that throughout the year. And absent any high quality immersion experience that helps teachers make that cognitive dissonance and shift in thinking, you're not going to get the anticipated outcomes that you want with ongoing implementation, no matter how wonderful the support. It's a big, big challenge, but it's something really important to consider.
Well, and to build on what Stephanie's saying, we hear a lot of folks in the field talk about the launch of a new curriculum, and they actually talk about it as an event. And we know from the change process, it's not an event. It's as Stephanie said, it's a phase that could last up to 2 years. that should be part of the way that professional learning supports the use of any new unit. And so when you think about multiple units, so we're trying to move people away from thinking about what I've heard some people call out of the box professional learning, just seeing what you've adopted to actually engaging teachers in what it feels like to experience that kind of curriculum. So we want to share 3 look-fors for what you might say, well, how is it, what makes it high quality curriculum-based professional learning? And this is built off of some work that we've supported at the Foundation in Science Education with the organization that was launched called Open SciEd. And so this is at the core 3 principles of the way they approached curriculum-based professional learning that we think the field could apply to any subject area in any set of high-quality instructional materials. And one is what you've heard Teresa say, what you've heard Stephanie say, and that is, and Lori as well, to emphasize that teachers need to experience the curriculum themselves as learners. And it does take more time to do that, but we feel like it really gives teachers a chance to experience a kind of learning that they maybe never experienced themselves as a learner. So how can I teach in a way I haven't experienced as a learner? And so really giving them the opportunity to engage in the student experiences, the way they're designed in the instructional materials, and the facilitator then is kind of modeling the role that a teacher plays. And so some folks call it taking on a student perspective or putting on a student hat, and not just doing like a sample activity, but staying in that mode maybe for a whole day in professional learning, where you're going through a series of activities and kind of seeing what this would feel like with students. And then the second is to look at video of an actual teacher teaching kids the same curriculum so that you can see that kids are asking maybe some of the same questions that you asked when you were in the professional learning, and that some of the approaches the teacher took to facilitating are the same ones that the facilitator took with you. And so it kind of makes it real when you see this, the kids experiencing and having the same kind of experience the teachers had. It actually ramps up, I think, their ability to feel comfortable going into the classroom and trying it, because they've not only experienced it, but they've seen what it looks like when a teacher teaches it with real students. And then third would be to engage teachers in analyzing the actual materials, and particularly the teacher-facing materials, giving teachers time to plan with the materials, to rehearse, maybe to later look at student work coming back from the classroom. And many of these high quality materials, the teacher materials, are 10 times more information to go through than what's in the student materials. And so even having a focus and helping people work through how the materials are organized with a particular focus. Maybe it's looking at how are we supporting student engagement, because there might be a lot of information there the first time you're looking at it. And so giving the teachers a way to work through it and then find the benefits of planning and working with them. We wanted to end with kind of giving you a chance to see what that looks like, what I was just talking about. And so we went into some classrooms in Taunton, Massachusetts, and looked at the support these teachers were getting to teach Open SciEd, as well as the curriculum, the professional learning that they were getting to support the Open SciEd curriculum. And we have a video on our website that you can find along with the report and a lot of other resources. I'll put the link in the chat, but just want to take a few minutes to see what this looks like. And even in this slide, you'll see teachers in professional learning on the left, and then you'll see students in the classroom. That teacher teaching in the classroom is also in the professional learning. And this is a scene from the video where you're going to see a parallel of teachers doing the same thing that the students do in the classroom. And again, that's one of the big ideas that we're trying to get across. So let's take a minute and look at this. We're asking teachers to potentially teach in a way that's very different than the way they've taught in the past, and maybe even different than how they've even learned themselves when they were in school. And so you kind of ask yourself, how can I teach in a way that I've never experienced as a learner? Well, one of the ways to address that is to give teachers the opportunity to experience that kind of learning. And if it's actually the same experiences that the students are going to do in the curriculum, then it's helping build confidence of not only what it feels like to learn this way, but now I see what my role is going to be when I'm facilitating that same kind of learning with students.
We know the candy has what in it?
Oil palm or palm oil.
Palm oil.
So is there a connection to my candy now? Okay, and that connection is, what did you say it was?
The palm oil.
Just the palm oil, all right. Because that's an ingredient?
Yes.
Okay.
And so just as students make meaning out of their experiences, teachers need to experience this kind of teaching so they can make meaning out of it, to understand what it means for them to teach this way.
Is it a before and after? Oh, that's. Do you think like the top one's before and the second one's after the steroids?
I have for wonders, what is the second gal's diet? It kind of looks like it's on steroids, like just slightly.
It's either on steroids or it's like has a lot of body
Are they
fat.
male?
This type of experience that is anchored in the instructional materials teachers will use with their students is referred to as curriculum-based professional learning. The design features and enabling conditions for curriculum-based professional learning offer a framework to plan and execute this transformative approach to professional learning.
By us being in student hat and the facilitator being the teacher, now I'm able to see that. So it's not the facilitator just saying, oh, at this point you bring up these talk moves and you ask these questions. He or she is really modeling how are you going to get this group of adults who know what they're doing to that next step. And that's something I can apply to my own students to get them to that next step.
Okay, I think that's concludes what we wanted to share with you guys today.
And that's just a piece of that video. The video has more, so I hope people will take time to watch the entire video. There's a short one and a long one, and I think they're a great way to introduce the idea. So take advantage of the great work that Carnegie invested in that.
And it's on the link in the website that I sent. The video's there along with the other resources.
This has been absolutely just fantastic. I think the video really helped illustrate what you guys have been talking about, for the last several minutes. If I could, I'd like to start asking some questions, but before I do that, Betsy, you had a couple comments in the chat. I wondered if you wanted to highlight those.
Well, I was wearing my only 2 years ago instructional coach hat, and it was really making me think about the part of the evaluation process where teachers have to be able to, anticipate questions that students may have. And so this is really an opportunity for them to experience those questions and be able to anticipate those. And I was especially thinking about your like gifted learners, because they often come with lots of knowledge about a subject area. And so this would be, kind of reflective a little bit of adults too. And then just sort of the idea of, you will be able to teach it better if you have been able to kind of experience all of those pieces of the lesson that, there's so much, as you mentioned, so much material in like a teacher manual that if you've gone through an experience that you sort of know how to approach it, and it's going to feel a little bit more authentic as a teacher when presenting that material to students. So I just really wish I had this material 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So I'm just very thankful of being able to kind of come into this and be able to now share it out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Betsy.
One of the things in response to that also that Jim and I often talk to people about is the fact that the new instructional materials that you get, the really high quality, the teacher resources are massive, and you can't even cover all of it in one orientation or even in one deep dive. That usually the way, and like he can talk a little bit about how Open Science does it, but usually you have to just take portions of it anyway. And then the next year you might add another component of it and say, okay, how do we build that into it? And so it's just, there's too much there. So as you experience it, you get the opportunity to say, how much can we handle this year? And, with this unit, and then what are we going to look at next year?
I really appreciate that, even that phased approach. Let's learn what we can this year and then add to it and those kinds of things. So here's a question for you, Stephanie and Jim. As we all know, we are facing an educator shortage right now. We also know that new teachers can feel overwhelmed once they are in their own classroom. How do you think this approach can benefit new teachers? And what kind of support do they need, whether it's in their training programs or from building leadership once they're in a classroom to successfully implement it to help students achieve? It's a big question.
I'm going to go big, Jim, then you can go more specific. So in all my years in professional learning, you know, that we would do surveys with teachers and we would say, what do you need most? Okay. And one of the things they always needed is more time. And the other thing was, I want something that's going to help me tomorrow. I want something that's relevant to what I'm doing in the classroom. And I think that's just another reason I'm such a huge fan of this kind of professional learning, is because this absolutely is relevant to what I'm doing tomorrow. And if we recognize that and don't make them responsible for implementing everything that the guide says, but what mentors and facilitators can help them sort through in terms of what's most important in their first 6 weeks and in their first year of teaching, I think we can help them be more successful.
Great, thanks for that.
Yeah, I think what I would add is, you know, we do know from the research on professional learning that for a long time we thought if we gave teachers lots of cool strategies, lots of deep pedagogical knowledge, and we developed a lot of content expertise, that they would be able to take the standards and accumulate the resources and put it all together. And I think one of the things that we found with the new college and career standards across the country is that the materials, that the standards are just asking a lot, and a teacher's job should be focused on teaching and not having to spend as much time on curating and sourcing and finding instructional materials, but really focusing on working with those materials and focusing on student learning, focusing on assessment, differentiation, personalization, all those things. And that requires that you work with some really high quality resources. So one of the things that we'd even love to see that goes beyond just the support teachers get in their job day to day is how we maybe rethink even teacher preparation, and that why can't teachers be exposed to these materials in courses and clinical work before they even become a licensed teacher. And I think that's another thing I know the CCSSO IMPD network is working on. It's one of the roles that states have a leverage opportunity because they oversee teacher certification. But I think that could be a huge game changer if you think about people coming into the profession and getting hired by a district, and they're already familiar with some of the instructional materials that those districts have adopted and are using. So I think too many times we're trying to catch up and help teachers get things that maybe they could have learned about even when they were preparing to become a teacher.
Yeah, great point. Teresa made a comment in the chat about veteran teachers benefiting from this as well. And so, Teresa, what might that, from a state level perspective, what does that maybe look like for veteran teachers?
Well, I think we just need to be careful in how we situate new teachers. I know that we get sometimes questions from the field about, oh, this will be great for new teachers. This is awesome for you know, students in higher ed and EPP programs. But I want to caution that, because having experienced it myself, I was a 17-year veteran and got HQIM before HQIM was actually a thing. And I didn't know, and this is going to sound bad, I didn't know how bad of a teacher I was until I had the HQIM, because the coherence wasn't there. I was an ELA teacher and I was teaching things in isolation. We read a book, a novel, and we did an essay, right? I had a separate book for vocabulary. I had a textbook, but oftentimes I only used the textbook for the things that I kind of wanted to teach, right? Or that the kids enjoyed. And then once I got the HQIM, even 17 years in, I was like, oh, I can teach an essay and a novel in conjunction, and I can teach it in a way that makes sense, right? Like Taught to Kill a Mockingbird, and we learned how to write paragraphs and we learned how to do citations while we read the book, not after the fact. And so for me, it's all about that coherence. And I think that's the game changer, is that HQIM and CBPL, and I experienced CBPL at the time. The vendor that we went with would not sell us the materials unless we actually purchased the PL that went with it. And it wasn't a one and done. It wasn't an orientation. We experienced the materials as students would. Most powerful professional learning I've ever experienced. So I think even veteran teachers, all teachers, I think in the right context and in the right situations, right, the professional learning is huge, can benefit. And I see it as a real game changer in the field of education. So from a state level perspective, I hope we can continue to promote and raise awareness on how important this work really is. Because to your point, Jim and Stephanie, the shrink wrap effect, I've heard it called that before, right? The launch where we just kind of undo the things and then we say good luck. Yeah, it doesn't matter. All the HQIM adoptions in the world aren't going to make a difference. It's the implementation and the follow through, the multiple year follow through, the ongoing support, and the space and time we need to get our schools and districts to a spot where we encourage them. You need to start looking at your school calendars a couple of years in advance, and you need to create the culture within your systems to create the time and space and energy for teachers to be able to do this work and to do it well.
One of the things I noticed throughout this time that we've spent together is all of Jim and Stephanie and Lori and you, Teresa, is just so passionate. It comes out when you're talking about this, and that the real impact it can have on instruction and on students, and what an important thing that is for all of us to be thinking about. And it's such a gift to be able to have a hand in helping shift that somewhat. Lori, I'm going to have the last question for you. As an external partner, what lessons did you learn about bringing this work to a state education agency, and what advice would you give to a state agency just beginning the process?
I would say that I learned through working with Teresa the power in the pause. There is a power in pausing and taking a step back and saying, hold on a second, we're going in this direction. We might want to think about educational coherence while we're looking at HQIM, and oh wait, this resource has brought some thoughts into my mind as well. Let's take a look at going this direction and doing the curriculum based professional learning study. So I really think that there's a power there of taking a step back to take a step forward. And I'll take that into my work moving forward as well. I also had, and Carrie, I'm glad that you tapped into the passion there. I had a very unique experience in my first year teaching as a special ed teacher, as a highly qualified science instructor at the high school level, where we adopted a new HQIM, and I was able to co-teach with two different biology and physical science teachers. And I was a special ed teacher, and so my self-contained class, I was about a week behind them. So I was experiencing the student experience in the classroom as I was co-teaching with them, and then able to understand the materials well enough when I actually implemented it in my own classroom. So it wasn't like a planned curriculum-based professional learning experience, but I really was experiencing it in that way because I was looking at the materials a week ahead of time, seeing how the students were responding to it in my co-teachers' classrooms, and able to make adjustments for my special ed students when I was doing the same lessons in my classroom, and which made our lessons run a lot smoother than they would have if I would have just been going into it blindly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Anytime you get to do something, right, you learn it, you get to understand it better. And I think that's part of the point of this, right? It's let people build their knowledge and skills around what they're trying to teach their kids to do. And before we're coming to the end, but does anybody have any other questions that you'd like to ask anybody today? Okay, well, I will take that as a let's wrap it up, Carrie. So thank you to our guests. Thanks for this wonderful presentation and sharing all of this really great work with us at every level. Lori, your partner work, and Teresa at the state, and Jim and Stephanie, just your brains behind the book that has inspired all of this. So thank you, everybody. And I really appreciate all of you for being here today.
Thank you, Carrie, for bringing us together and for the great facilitation. Pulling it together. Thank you.
It's been great having the opportunity to share this work and see how that it's inspiring others, the way Stephanie and I got excited about it as we talked to people and putting the book and the report and stuff together.
Yeah, great. And Teresa, I'm glad that you survived the storm.
I did. I think it's done now. I think.
I thought it was just accents for some of the big comments she was making.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
Well, it's come to Marion now, so
Yeah.
Lori and
Okay. It's
Lori
your
and I have
turn.
sound effects now.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right.